introduce, well, actually, he needs no introduction. I'm very pleased to invite Joshua Kesselman to be our darshan for today's sermon.
I'm honored to be able to give the DVar Torah today. As David nice enough, I will introduce. I'm Joshua Kesselman. My family's been members here for 14 years. As I look out, I recognize, if not know, almost everyone here. But in case, I'll introduce a little more about myself as this goes on. As a warning, as any good DVar Torah sermon might be, some of this might be a little controversial, some will be enlightening. Hopefully, my description of my journey to being a loud and proud Jew helps all of you figure out how to navigate the new world that we find ourselves in right now. As all DVar Torah should be, they should be tied to the actual portion today. And I'm lucky that today's portion actually ties very well to my topic. Jacob had to wrestle with an angel today. I too have been wrestling for the last year and a half with my place as a Jew and my place for the Jewish people in this world today that is very different than the world I grew up with. Jacob did this wrestling out of nervousness to come home and meet his brother Esau after leaving on not the best terms. I do this because I'm nervous that the world has changed its terms for being a Jew and accepting of the Jewish people. Jacob was given a new name after wrestling. His new name was Israel. Israel became the name of the people and the place of the Jews. Again, very fitting based on Israel's spot in the world right now today. Israel is our homeland. It's linked to the Jewish people now, then, and forever. So, as I wrestle with my Jewish identity, there are some interesting things I'd like to tell you about my identity. I'm a conservative Jew. That probably should surprise no one in this room. I'm an ardent Zionist. I got that from my grandmother, who spent time in Israel in her late teens and early 20s when it was still the Mandate of Palestine, drinking guards under the table to smuggle Jews in. She had fled Poland originally with her family to Canada and then left university in Canada to go be part of, at that point, the Mandate of Palestine to give the Jews a safe place to be. For a little controversy, I'm also at some level an atheist. But I believe it's very important to also be Jewish and to understand my Jewish heritage and to believe in Jewish values. Hence, I'm, as I said earlier, proudly a conservative Jew. I'm a liberal. I'm an American. I'm rather dysgraphic and dyslexic, and the idea of writing and reading a sermon scares me, but, sometimes you do what must be done. Additionally, I've also written for our local paper a couple times. Again, not my comfort zone, but sometimes you must do what you must do. Jewish values are very important to me. Growing up, I had played to me a song by Debbie Friedman, Inena Nili Nili, which I'm probably messing up the Hebrew of, but it basically teaches the teachings of Rabbi Hillel. The first is, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? That is why we Jews must stand up and fight right now. If we are not for ourselves, who will join us? Second question is, if I'm only for myself, what am I? That drives me to stand up and fight for the rest of my Jewish people, not just ignore things, let things be, try and live a safe life, but it's important to actually do for others. If not now, when? I don't think there can be more important words right now for the Jewish experience in the world. And finally, my mom taught me as a young child, every culture has the golden rule. In Judaism, we have a golden rule. Ours is ever so slightly different than the one that you will hear, the dominant Christian one in this country. Theirs is do unto others as you would have done unto you. Ours is actually an inverse of that. It's do not do unto others as you would not want done unto yourself. At a core, it's live and let live. This is something I've taken to heart for all my life. I absolutely believe others have the right to live their lives, and I absolutely expect to be accorded the right to live my life as I see fit, so long as I'm not harming others. that also is a driving factor in how I see the world right now and why it's important, because I do not feel like I'm being allowed to let live, why I must stand up. So basically, given all that, we get back to something that I think Dr. Stein has stated repeatedly at his appeals. Hineni, here I am. I'm standing up, I'm speaking out. Not just at temple, but I try and speak out at town meetings. I try and speak out in a local paper. I want to make sure people understand that Jews, although we are a very, very, very small minority, have a place in this world, need a place in this world, should be given a place in this world. I started this journey not on October 7th, but probably closer to 2021, the prior time that Israel was forced to go into Gaza to stop the endless rain of missiles on cities. After that, I became acutely and depressingly aware that I, as a liberal Jew in America, was getting my media from people that were incredibly biased against me as a Zionist. I had to stop watching John Oliver. I had to stop watching Trevor Noah on The Daily Show. They gave biased, horrific views of what was happening in Israel. They broke it down to a numbers game. Palestinians die at higher rates, therefore it's the Jews' fault. They didn't add any context that Jews spend billions of dollars on Iron Dome, on having every building have a bomb shelter, on doing everything they can do to preserve life. What is happening in Gaza is a tragedy. The innocent lives there are a tragedy that they are dying. But you cannot boil things down to a counting of lives. You have to look at values. You have to look at outcomes. You have to look at what people are trying to do. In Israel, we're trying to preserve our lives and their lives. Hamas is trying to kill their own people to make a point to the world and make it a numbers game. And unfortunately, our media in this country has eaten it up, hook, line, and sinker. And we, as Jews, are left to push back. Because if not us, who? Also, much to my kids' chagrin, I stopped buying Ben & Jerry's. Because a Jewish company, historically, who had kosher for Passover ice cream in Israel, in Passover I heard about growing up, has turned against us. It has been institutionally captured. And again, I cannot in good faith give my dollars, at least discretionary dollars that I don't have to spend, to a company like that. So, my kids may not like it, but we buy Haagen-Dazs. It's not the worst deal. Unfortunately, this hate that I saw in 2021 was nothing. It intensified, I don't know, tenfold, 100-fold since October 7th. October 7th might have been the worst day in Israel since its creation. October 8th was the worst day for Jews in America. The day after, when there were still combatants, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, in Israel, and our world erupted. It erupted with hatred. It erupted with vile hatred, decrying the state of Israel, claiming Zionists are evil. This was organized. I have nothing to believe, but it must have been pre-planned, because you can't get college students to do anything on one day notice. And that was the hard day here. That was one of the days I decided I needed to stand up and be counted. I needed to not go quiet. We are in a very different place, Jews here and Jews in Israel, than we were 80 years ago. Today we have a country. I cannot emphasize how that changes the world, how that's different than my grandparents. For most of Jewish history, the most important skill you needed as a Jew was to know when to hide and to know when to flee. Because when they came, and they always came, sometimes it was decades between, sometimes it was months between, but the Cossacks, whatever program would come, when they came, you needed to know how to run, or you were potentially a victim. Luckily, there have been times where something else has been true. We needed to know when to fight. One of those times was Purim, a holiday that has a special meaning, as many of you know. My family is intimately involved in selecting the Mishloach Minot bags. Purim, Esther chose to fight, chose to make a space for her people. Here in the U.S., we have religious freedom. We've had an amazing 200-some-odd year run, 250-year run, I believe, actually, at this point. Almost, 2 more years. We have had choices of when to fight. I do not want to lose this country. I choose to fight. I choose to stand up and be counted. Alas, in Europe and the Middle East, pogroms are back. I don't know if you saw what happened in Amsterdam, but that scares me. In the Middle East, Jews have been kicked out of every country except for Israel. By pogroms, by force. Luckily, we still have the 1948 miracle that is Israel, and it is half of our Jewish population. Basically, the other half is in the U.S. Statistically less significant, there's about 1 million Jews in other places, mainly Canada, which, by the way, is facing the same problems the U.S. had, if not worse. France also has pretty bad problems, and the UK, which, again, has serious issues with anti-Semitism. So it comes down to the U.S. and Israel. We should, as much as possible, preserve both options. We should not be forced to flee to Israel. We should demand our country, but we should also not let Israel be demonized. I learned recently, when do you consider anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? There's something called the 3 Ds. When Israel is delegitimized, demonized, or provided against a double standard, an unmeetable standard that no other country has provided. When people describe Zionism and Israel in those ways, they aren't talking about being anti-Zionist. They're talking about being anti-Semitic. And we have a duty to call that out, to raise the consciousness so that we will still have a place to live 10 years, 50 years, 100 years from now. Many people don't even realize, sadly, that they're being anti-Semitic, and it's up to us to, sometimes politely, sometimes more forcefully, inform them what they're doing and what it means. So I choose to fight. The first thing I do is engage. I've written op-eds. I try and call out anti-Semitism in whatever form it is. I call out biased attacks against Israel. My family has joined 2 different local groups in Wilton that are specifically fighting hate, including very specifically anti-Semitism. For me, I choose to make my fight local. I think it's most important to have my fight here and now in my place. I respect and am awed by people who take their fight national, but even a little thing makes a difference. Every little thing that helps preserve our spaces makes a difference. I choose to learn. I have switched my normal book diet from sci-fi and fantasy to much more interesting and or depressing books like Jews Don't Count. We need to talk about anti-Semitism. People love dead Jews. I wouldn't say they're pleasant reads, but I would highly recommend all of them. They help explain where we are today, and they were all written before October 7th. They all saw the problem coming. They all saw progressive spaces collapsing against Jews before I saw it, or before I really fully saw it. We need to demand our rights. Jews have civil rights. We should not have to spend on security for every single event here. Churches don't do that. We should not have to worry about walking in public in New York when there are riots that are anti-Israel, whether we have a mug and dove it. We should compare our civil rights struggle to others and demand that they afford us the same rights that we proudly have marched for and afforded them. We should look for true friends and allies. We should not be doing this alone. As I said earlier, there are 15 million of us in the world? It's a statistical anomaly, not even a minority. But we also need to reject false allies. For many years, we've allied with many progressive causes, many causes on the left, who, quite frankly, have turned against us in horrible numbers. We need to look for true allies. We do not need to agree with people on every subject. You can agree with people on one subject and have them ally that, and have other people on allies and other things. We need to reach beyond our own echo chambers and reach beyond our comfort zone. And quite frankly, we need to speak out. I spoke out. When I spoke out at my town meetings twice, the only non-Jewish people to reach out to me were Republican office holders. That hurt. As a lifelong Democrat and liberal, I have to tell you that stung. But again, it taught me a lesson. I need to look for allies everywhere. I also fight as a family. Sharon has helped me proofread, edit, make everything I said actually have the correct words, not have errant extra knots that completely changed the meeting. My daughter Maya has made sure that I've learned what a comma is, because apparently I have an aversion to it in all my writing. Tali, who's doing Tal Shabbat today, proudly wears her Star of David many days. Sharon and I attended, with actually 3 other people in this room, a rally for Jews in November in D.C., despite the buses not showing up due to anti-Semitism. We got in a car and we drove 5 hours. We went to the rally and we drove 5 hours home. We fought. We stood up. We were counted. I've been visibly Jewish and pro-Israel. Since 100 days, I've been wearing a Friends of IDF bracelet. I have a pin, Stand With Us. We've had yard signs. They were stolen twice, and the third time they were stolen, we caught the people on camera and pressed charges. Hopefully they are not stolen again. I have worn an End Jew Hatred sign when I've spoken up at town meetings. I, when safe, choose to be visibly Jewish. Again, not when I don't feel safe, only when I do. I'm not encouraging people to risk their lives. I'm encouraging them to push the limit reasonably and not let the cage collapse on us, but demand our space. I've written to the local paper. I will continue to do that. I've commented on Facebook. I've even commented back at YouTube against some of the trolls. That's probably a waste of my time, but every once in a while, sometimes you just need to pick a fight to be in the fight. I fought desperately to remove an anti-Semitic writer in residence from our town in Wilton one time. She needed to go, and I had to go back to the town meetings twice after when people demanded our town apologize to her, say any apology should be for her refusing to sit with an Israeli writer, or actually an American Jewish writer who's pro-Israel on a panel about girls. I've shown up at local rallies and vigils in Wilton. I've reached out. I specifically thanked every friend who has, reached out to me for checking in. I've tried to encourage people who I think might be on the fence to learn more and to join. I have changed where our tzedakah goes. There are a lot of fights I believe in. I believe in women's reproductive rights. There are lots of people who believe in that right, as my wife has pointed out, that will support that cause. There are not as many that will support Israeli causes right now. So I've tailored my tzedakah to places that support Israel. I've had to double check places that I used to support to make sure I still support them. I cannot in good faith give to NPR anymore. Why do I fight? Because I have a child going to college next year, and that scares me. It scares me in ways that I expected, the price tag. It scares me in ways that I never suspected. Who will her roommate be, and will her roommate actually accept her for who she is? I fight because my grandparents had to flee Poland. Luckily, they fled before the Holocaust. One made it here, one made it to Canada. They met. I fight because, as I said, Ida, my grandmother, is an inspiration to me. I fight because I'm an ardent Zionist. I fight because Israel is Plan A and Plan B for the Jews. For the half of the Jewish population that lives in Israel, it is Plan A. For the rest of us, it is Plan B when everything else goes south. Without Israel, there is no Plan C. Sadly, there are Jews who do not understand this yet. If you can reach out to them, try and help them understand. Again, as I said, attacks on Israel, especially when they lead to a double standard, demonization or de-Israelization, they are anti-Semitism, and they should be called out as such. It's not all doom and gloom. This is an opportunity to fight for a better future. We've had a great time recently, in the recent history. We can have a great time again as Jewish people. We can find acceptance further. But again, sometimes you have to fight for it. I've also had to change what I read. I try and avoid being completely trapped in an echo chamber. I do try and read both sides. Both sides do have interesting talking points. If you don't understand the talking points that you're going to be confronted with on the other side, you'll have a lot of trouble effectively communicating. My new newsfeed involves the Free Press and the Honestly podcast, Shai Davidai, who I highly recommend to anyone who has a podcast and writes, is a Columbia professor fighting there. Times of Israel, The Forward. Bill Maher, least you know, needs some humor in my life. I still listen to NPR and read it, but with a much more critical ear. I can no longer read the New York Times. I can't pay them money. I'm sorry. They have turned so far against Jews, and they tie it up in such a nice bow, they are part of the problem. Same with the BBC or The Guardian. Same with listening to John Oliver, which again used to be a source of humor for me, but I've had to switch what I do. Really, now is a time to stand up as a Jew. And to that end, I ask everyone to say, Am Yisrael Ha'ad.